Welcome to Capitol Hill. Well, on Friday, the Greens add new senators to their ranks and take up the role as the balance of power party in the Senate. And today, the Greens leader, Bob Brown, addressed the National Press Club. He's promising stability in the Senate, but he still wants changes to the mining tax, and he's given a guarantee that the Greens wouldn't vote to rescind the carbon tax if the coalition got into government. That spells some trouble ahead, potentially, for both major parties, with Julia Gillard saying she won't agree to amend the mining tax and Tony Abbott's promising to rescind the carbon tax to abolish it completely if he took up office. The opposition is readying itself for the prospect of an election from any time, tidying up policy and agreeing to have a body of policy across 40 portfolio areas ready by the end of this month. To discuss the issues, I've been joined in Sydney by Labor MP Ed Husic and in Melbourne by Liberal MP Josh Frydenberg. Welcome to you both.
Hi. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good.
Hi, Lyndal. Hi, Ed. G'day, Josh.
Ed, Bob Brown wants changes to the mining tax. These are changes he's spoken about before. But your Prime Minister, the Prime Minister says she won't agree to them. How are you going to get it through the Senate without agreeing to some of what Bob Brown wants?
Well, I mean, we've outlined over the course of the year what the arrangements were as they were applied to the minerals resource rent tax. We think that there is now agreement around that, or broad agreement around that. Obviously, there'll be people that have their views, and certainly Senator Brown's entitled to express his views, as are others in this debate, but it's important now to move on. And the reason we've got to move on is that this, what the initiatives that we're putting forward will provide for prosperity, or evening out some of that prosperity, both for now and for future generations. Cuts to corporate tax rate, support for superannuation and top up, particularly for people on low incomes, supporting infrastructure around those mining towns themselves, and also importantly small business tax write-offs as well. That'll mean a lot to a lot of small businesses across the country. So it's trying to ensure that we all prosper from this mining boom.
Josh, Bob Brown also outlined some research he's had done, which he says shows that over the next 5 years, $50 billion of profits will go offshore because most of the mining companies are foreign owned. Is it worthwhile having the debate about foreign ownership of mining in the country?
Look, I think, in the Bob Brown bragathon, so to speak, which we saw today, he was flexing his muscles and showing both the media and the Australian public who's boss. He basically holds the Gillard government hostage for the next 2 years because they rely on, the Labor Party relies on the Greens support in both the House and the Senate. When Bob Brown talks about foreign ownership, he's talking about companies like BHP and Rio Tinto. Now, both those companies are listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. Both those companies are held by millions of Australians as shareholders in their superannuation. BHP has its headquarters in Melbourne. I mean, I think he's stretching the definition a bit far here to suit his own political purposes, and together with the government, he's going to provide a mining tax which Australia does not need and which is going to increase the sovereign risk for foreign investors in this important industry.
Ed, the mining industry has said that Bob Brown's attack on foreign investment or questioning of foreign ownership of mining is xenophobic, and they point out, as Josh has, that mining creates superannuation wealth, it also creates jobs. Has Bob Brown missed the point?
Well, I think we get these arguments from time to time about foreign investment. We've also got it in relation to investment in the agriculture sector as well, these concerns that have been expressed about foreign investment. Naturally, we want to see Australian companies prosper and we want to see homegrown talent succeed in the economy, but from time to time foreign investment's important. And I know, I come from a party where foreign investment is a hotly debated topic, but the fact of the matter is you turn the tap off and you turn off prosperity within the economy, and that has impacts on a lot of families. The reverberations from that are significant. So, there'll be people from time to time that want to bang that drum, and I don't think they're going to get very far because reality, clarifies the vision pretty quickly. And we do in a world where, economies are opened up a lot more and where we are working a lot more across international boundaries. You just can't pull the simplistic stunts that people think they can get away with.
Well, can I just say though, Lyndal, can I just say though, while Ed, gives us those platitudes about how important foreign investment is to the country, his side of politics introduces a mining tax without consultation with the industry itself. That introduces sovereign risk and is a turn-off to foreign investors in this country. So you might be talking about how good foreign investment for this country is, but by your very actions in introducing the mining tax without consultation, you have introduced significant sovereign risk into this country. And let me tell you, those foreign investors will find other places for their money. And we have to understand, in the mining sector, you need to pour billions of dollars in to try to make some profits, and it's a cyclical industry. Some years you will make profits, but many years you will make losses, and we need to encourage foreign investment in those sectors because government can't play that role.
In the end, though, Josh, if the government...
Just hang on a second. I just wanted to quickly jump in, though. The companies that Josh was lauding earlier a lot of those companies were satisfied with the arrangements as a result of the consultation that we did. The problem with Josh and the coalition side of politics is they aren't happy with the fact that those companies are satisfied with where things are at, and they go around claiming that there wasn't consultation when there was,
Josh, if I can ask, if the government does manage to get the mining tax through the Senate, if you come to government at the next election, don't you have the same problem that you would have with the carbon tax, that once it's in, it's difficult to get rid of?
Look, if we win the next election, we have a mandate to repeal the mining tax and to repeal the carbon tax if that is in, because these are fundamental positions that we have taken. And if you look at the polls today, the Australian public don't want a carbon tax. They don't want a mining tax. And despite, Labor's political weakness, they are proceeding with this, and it's going to be their own political death. And I just think it's very unfortunate that the Greens, who represent only a small minority of the public, have so much power to determine an outcome for the rest of Australian industry and the Australian economy and the Australian public.
But the Greens leader Bob Brown has given what he calls a rolled gold guarantee that he would not vote to rescind the carbon tax. Don't you have a problem with the numbers in the Senate that you may not actually be able to do what you promised you would do?
Well, let's see how this plays out. I mean, that's what Bob Brown says today, but let's just see what actually is the result of the next election whenever it comes, and let's actually see how this debate plays out. But if Bob Brown is making all those promises today, that's pretty stubborn on his behalf, because he won't be listening to the Australian people at the next election.
Ed, the Prime Minister says that the carbon tax announcement is still weeks away. Now, that may not be a whole month, that may be 2 or 3 weeks away. Is the uncertainty, though, beginning to hurt the government?
I think clearly people want the detail and they'd like to get it as soon as they can, but this is an important reform, and there's no point jumping the gun and being premature in terms of trying to make announcements when clearly we've got detail that we're trying to sort out. Ultimately, though, the bottom line is both sides of politics have committed to reducing emissions, and we need to do that by 2020 under the international agreements we both agree we need to adhere to as a country. Now, what we're trying to do is get to a market-based mechanism that will ensure that we can cut pollution but also do it in a way that brings industry on board. We've had significant endorsement for a market-based mechanism. I mean, we had the NAB chief Cameron Klein yesterday saying that from an economic perspective that what we're trying to put forward makes economic sense, and we need to make sure that we get to that point as quickly as possible. But having said that, and going back to what I said earlier, there's no point jumping the gun without all the details settled.
Now, Ed, the opposition is promising to have quite a lot of policy ready, although not announced, in the next few days. The debate on industrial relations, workplace relations, has just been opened up. Ed, is it possible to have a sensible debate about changes to Labor's industrial relations laws that business is calling for?
Well, I've said to both Josh publicly, and I've said to Jamie publicly, Jamie Briggs I should say, when we've been on this program previously, I'm happy to have that discussion because I think, and as I've said elsewhere, fundamentally what the coalition believes strongly in is they believe in individual contracts, they believe in watering down unfair dismissal laws, and they certainly are not supporters of having a third party to be able to mediate disputes when clearly both sides of an industrial situation aren't able to reach a landing on things. Taking just very quickly in terms of individual agreements, I mean, the problem with Australian workplace agreements were they weren't reflective of a true bargaining situation where both parties could sit down and negotiate an agreement that suited that workplace. More often than not, big companies, such as the ones I had to face when I was a union official, have their worked out agreement, and there is very little scope for an employee to be able to negotiate variations to that agreement, and as a result it's just basically dictated one-way street, and regardless of putting in a no disadvantage test, which is basically designed to make sure that someone doesn't go backwards in economic terms, that is not a pure negotiation piece, and ultimately big business would not want these individually negotiated contracts because it'd be an administrative burden. I agree we have to have the debate, but the coalition needs to actually step up and put forward what its details are.
Josh, you've called for some changes in the past. Is it possible for the coalition to have the debate and avoid the scare that Labor invariably raises about how far you would like to push the changes?
Look, Lyndal, the problem for Labor is that the union movement and its acolytes in the parliament, like Ed, who said he was a national president of a particular union, they're driving the workplace policies of this government. And these workplace policies have actually caused harm and have actually reduced productivity. I mean, productivity in Australia went back 1.8% in the March quarter. And what we're seeing, for example, in the Wonthaggi desalination plant in Victoria, where wages claims have been successfully struck by the union movement without commensurate productivity gains written in. And this is a real problem. And I just think that whether it's the right of entry or whether it's unfair dismissals or whether it's productivity gains, what we're seeing in the current environment is that business and industry groups are crying out for reform. And we need to listen to what they say. And Tony Abbott has been consistent all along. He will take a strong and an effective workplace relations policy to the next election. So Labor can go on with its scare campaign about work choices, but what we're really interested in is results in the workplace where productivity gains are guaranteed because at the end of the day, that's what's going to improve the Australian economy.
Hang on a second, Josh. I mean, can I just say, I think in terms of my response to Lyndal's question, I tried to deal with, from your perspective, what your party feels strongly about in terms of industrial relations reform. I didn't have to come out and do the rote lines, and I certainly didn't engage in any scare campaign. But if you're going to say things like, for example, that wage increases should be dealt with through productivity, I mean, no one disagrees with that. But I mean, again, I represented workers. Well, hang on a second, Josh. Let me just come back to give you an example.
I mean, you're running down
I love it when libs get under heat, they jump. When libs get under heat, they jump around like a frog in boiling water. Let me just give you some facts.
Pull out your list. If we could just very quickly, because we're about to run out of time.
When I was going through, well, hang on, Josh. Well, either you're going to respect different opinions or not. You're going to be a typical lib, or you're going to respect opinion and different opinions. Now, what I'm trying to say is this:
not the ball.
There is a in the past when I represented workers in certain companies where they had productivity growth of 15% per annum. They never saw a 15% wage increase. Now, let's be fair dinkum about that issue.
I'm very sorry, gentlemen. We have run out of time. No doubt we'll have more of this debate at a later stage, but thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Lyndal. Thanks, Josh.
And thanks for joining Capitol Hill today.